interesting to watch. It seems like it all kind of runs together. So you know, it's a very interesting thing when you start going to jail and you go a lot. Usually somebody says, I'm getting my feet in line, Matt. That usually somebody says you've been arrested like a couple hundred times or something. That was my feet in line. So I didn't get that one. So I'll just presume it and say, you know, I've been arrested a lot of times. And when you've been arrested a lot of times, you kind of learn a lot about courts and stuff. It's kind of interesting. You know, most of us didn't go to law school. Most judges in the country, I think, didn't go to law school. Really, justice of the peace didn't go to law school. Our judge in Nevada that put us in jail all the time, he had a high school education, and he finally retired. Well, he actually died, and his son was a cop who I think had a high school education there. So it's interesting, though, because you do learn things in court, and so even the judges do. So in Nevada, we went to court a lot of times in the beginning days when we were trying to stop nuclear testing. Then they finally gave up because they couldn't keep us all that many people in jail in little Nye County. So they kind of they hold us for a little while and let us go. But I went to see this Judge Sullivan one day. Marcus Page and I went out early one morning and got arrested, and they took us down there and to the new jail named after Judge Sullivan. You know, this high school guy that made good. They named the jail after him and the court. He said, you know, I got a great education here. He says from Nevada Desert experience and people coming out here to the test site. He said, after all, he said, you know, you had Ramsey Clark and you had Dan Ellsberg and Dan Berrigan, and he was going through all the different people that came out there, and he said, you learn a lot. And I did too, you know, I learned a lot by going to these courts and such things. And then you go to School of the Americas. My gosh, who's a better law professor than Bill Quigley? Now, I have a clue what he does in his classrooms, but he sure does a hell of a job in the courts and out on the streets. And he even got thrown in jail down there at Katrina trying to help people to get it just into a city building, and they threw him in jail. He's all over the place. So I learned from him a lot. And one of the things that I learned that I thought was very interesting was how you kind of change the playing field there. How do you kind of turn things around a little bit? And so what happened to us recently, I was supposed to talk about here about how, you know, we were found guilty and all of that sort of thing. And then I had a little debate here with Dolores. I said, I don't want to put down there guilty. I said, you know, what we're putting down here that what we did is that we kind of changed the ball field there and kind of started bringing all this evidence in. It wasn't evidence that we didn't trespass. We didn't even really care about that. We could have. We just walked up a road. There were, not like School of the Americas. There were no signs, no trespassing. They didn't have the 3 fences. They happen to have 4 or 5 by now. I don't know, down there at Fort Benning. You know, we just walked up there. We could have fought that, but we decided, no. Bill kind of comes into court one day and says, I'd like to make a little evidentiary presentation here. And his good associate, Debbie, his wife, comes in with a trailer full of all these reports and books and all this sort of stuff. All the studies that are done on torture. So instead of these two rang-dangle guys from Berkeley, a Jesuit and a Franciscan, being tried about, you know, did we cross a line or not cross a line, we raised one of the most critical questions of our society today. Do we torture people? Is that allowed? In Rios Montt, yeah, they raised that question in Guatemala, but what about right here in the United States and the places that we go to? Now, I grew up in a time when, you know, we knew about torture. We knew about torture, you know, the Nazis, they tortured and killed the Jews, and the Japs, they tortured people, and, you know, then the communists, they sent them out to Gulag, Archipelago, and all that sort of thing. But we never really thought about ourselves as torturers, although we did. We did the same thing to people, and we used them as guinea pigs. We even tortured our own soldiers at the Nevada test site. They made them guinea pigs during the test. But that question of what is our right to take another human being and to dehumanize that person, to take away not only their freedom but their ability even to survive. Where does that come from, and how did that happen? So that we kind of, first, most of us that have been down to the School of the Americas, we kind of got used to the fact that somehow we participated. So there was certainly some kind of collusion, or the government likes to call it conspiracy. Now we're using that to talk about our president. He's a conspirator in torture. He told I sent them down to the basement. I proved everything they did. That new report that just came out about the president is now admitting that he proved everything they did. He is a conspirator. He can be put in federal prison for that.
Right on.
And so we all of a sudden, Bill kind of turned the case around and started introducing all this evidence, but not about us, but about what they were doing. And showing that really what was happening in our society is that we had not only become people who were in collusion with, through the School of the Americas, with people that the young lady Tuchik was talking about, that were supporting Rios Ma, etc., but that we were actually doing the torturing, and it was a very big shock. I think the two big shocks we had visually, Marshall McLuhan used to talk about that for visual people, it's television, it's just a surface thing. And the one that always sticks in our minds are those planes going into those towers. And we had different reactions to that. Some of us were scared to death, and now we're going to be bombing, and that's all we've done ever since in our war of vengeance. But also the idea, the pictures that started appearing about Abu Ghraib and our own neighbor kids, our own neighborhood kids who were involved in becoming torturers. Maybe that's the bottom line for torture. There's many people who believe that. I met a very interesting man, Mark from France, who came and did an interview with some of us, and he's done a deep, deep study of torture and really believes that the really underlying thing is not whether it's in any way justified or gets any information, but what does it do to people who torture? And what does it do to a country who tortures? How does one feel about Guatemala, where you've lived in a world of Rios Ma? What has that done to the soul of those people? And the people that are struggling to get the land are not only struggling to get the land, but the soul of that country back. Because internationally we enter the world in that way. And how exciting it is now to see a new kind of soul movement going through all of Latin America as dictators have kind of moved this side. Morales is a big hero of mine. I read about him in Leslie Gill's School of the Americas book. He had a picture of how they were going on. They were, he's the head of the Cocaderos. That's right, Coca, right?
Cocaderos.
Yeah. And so they were marching along, and the police were stopping him, and I said, boy, that guy's pretty brave, And then I looked at the paper the next day, and I said, oh my God, he's the president. He elected the president of the country in Libya. And all of a sudden, the soul in these countries is coming alive again. It has been throttled and killed by their ability to kill, and that is what has happened to our country. How ashamed we were to see those pictures. But I was just as stunned at seeing the pictures of people being tortured as seeing our children doing the torturing. Because you don't start out that way, you're not taught that way. When we first went on, you were talking about the Witness for Peace, and we went to Nicaragua, and Ray Hartman explaining to us about how the children were taken and taught how to torture. How they were taught how to, you don't get born that way, you get trained to do that. And I met some young people who talked about that. One young man became a Franciscan. He talked about how American soldier taught him how to put cigarettes out in the hands of these bad people, and he was doing that. And then his dad was a little mayor somewhere and got him out of back to the village, and he went to school, and the teacher was the one he had tortured, and somehow he had to deal with that. So we see that now that had happened to us. So I think that I believe that we felt called very much so. It was mentioned here earlier about feeling this deep down calling within you that, my God, if we are human beings, that we have to, we have to rise up and meet this challenge. And so we felt very serious about putting torture on trial, and we felt very good that we had a lawyer who would never win a case for any of us. Nobody of us has ever walked out of a court free. Anyway, I thought maybe you could get torture in jail too. But by God, it began to take on. And the second round was the next year. We go down there at the same time as the School of the Americas, and so it started.